when billionaire black CEO Ethan Cole brought his beloved mother, Grace, to the Whitford family mansion for a historic $900 million merger dinner. He never imagined the night would turn into a storm of humiliation, from subtle slights at the dining table to cruel taunts that reduced Grace to tears. The powerful white dynasty exposed their arrogance and racism, believing Ethan would swallow their contempt for the sake of business. But in the quiet of the garden, Grace urged her son not to let anger consume him, while Ethan swore that dignity meant more than wealth. In the study, as Eleanor Whitford mocked Grace one last time, Ethan stood, shattered the contract, and canceled the deal in just 5 minutes, leaving the empire trembling. What followed was chaos. Headlines erupted, Whitford stock crashed, and the world rallied behind Ethan's powerful stand. In the end, the Whitford's legacy of cruelty crumbled, while Ethan and his mother walked away with something money could never buy: dignity, respect, and a legacy that would outlive empires. The golden envelope sat on Ethan's mahogany desk like a trophy no one could ignore. "Whitford Group," he read aloud, his voice low but sharp. His mother, Grace, looked up from the kitchen doorway. "Whitford, as in those Ethan smirked. "America's royal family of money. They want to welcome me into their circle." Translation: they want our $900 million deal. Grace wiped her hands on a dish towel, half proud, half wary. "And you're going?" "I built an empire, Mom. I don't need their approval. But sometimes, you have to sit at the table to remind people you belong there." The Whitford estate loomed in whispers, marble, gold, influence older than the Constitution. To be invited was to be measured. Grace hesitated. "Do they know I'm coming?" "They invited me. But if they want my company, they meet the woman who raised me." Ethan's tone was final, protective. Grace's lips trembled into a smile. "You're stubborn like your father." "Or like you," Ethan countered. 2 days later, a private driver waited outside their home. Grace wore her Sunday best, navy blue dress, pearl earrings, and quiet dignity. Ethan, in a tailored black suit, offered his arm. The driver, a young man in a white cap, blinked at Grace and hesitated. Sir, are we picking up the housekeeper too?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's my mother." The driver paled. "My apologies, Mr. Cole." Grace touched Ethan's wrist. "Let it go," she whispered. But Ethan's silence was heavier than words. As the car wound up the endless Whitford driveway, Grace whispered, "I don't like how people look at us." "They'll look, Mom," Ethan said, "but they'll never look down on us. Not tonight." The estate appeared, a palace draped in old money, chandeliers glowing through tall windows, white pillars guarding the entrance. Guests in designer gowns spilled across the marble steps, laughing champagne laughter. As Ethan stepped out with Grace on his arm, conversations stuttered, eyes darted. A ripple of disbelief spread through the crowd. "Is that his mother?" someone whispered. "I thought she was the maid." Another voice trailed. Ethan's smile never faltered. Grace's back straightened, though her hands trembled slightly. The Whitfords stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. Eleanor Whitford's red lips curled, her pearls gleaming like armor. "Mr. Cole," she called, voice smooth but cold. "And guest." Ethan's eyes narrowed, but his reply was steady. "This is Grace Cole, my mother." Gasps fluttered. Eleanor's smile tightened. "Of course, how unexpected," Grace whispered. "Ethan, maybe." But Ethan gripped her hand. "We belong here, Mom." And together, they climbed the marble steps into the lion's den. The Whitford estate swallowed its guests like a cathedral of money. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Portraits of pale ancestors glared from every wall, and polished marble reflected every misstep. Grace clutched Ethan's arm tighter. Her Sunday best shoes clicked nervously on the floor. "Ethan," she whispered, "this place feels like a museum." "It's a stage," Ethan corrected softly. "And everyone's performing." A uniformed butler approached, bowing slightly. His eyes slid past Ethan to Grace. "Sir, may I take the lady's coat?" Grace smiled kindly. "Thank you." She offered it, but the man hesitated, blinking twice. Ethan caught it. "Is there a problem?" The butler stammered. "Forgive me. I thought she might be staff." Grace's lips parted in shock. "Excuse me." Ethan's tone dropped to ice. "She's my mother. Remember her face. She'll be treated better than royalty here tonight." The butler flushed crimson, nodding rapidly. "Yes, sir." "Of course, sir." Grace touched Ethan's arm, whispering, "Please, let it go." But Ethan's gaze burned holes into the man's retreating back. In the ballroom, music swelled. Violins, polished and perfect. Champagne glasses clinked. voices hummed in gossip. But the moment Ethan and Grace entered, a hush rolled through the room like wind. A woman in diamonds whispered loudly enough to be heard, "Oh my, he brought her." Her companion chuckled. "I thought she was the maid following him in." Ethan ignored them, but Grace heard every word. "Son," she murmured. "Maybe I shouldn't." "You're staying," Ethan interrupted firmly. "I built this empire for us, not for them." The Whitford matriarch approached Eleanor Whitford, wrapped in silk, pearls glowing like moonlight. Her smile was sugar-laced with arsenic. "Mr. Cole," she purred. "What an impressive entrance. And this must be your mother." Grace extended her hand politely. "Grace Cole, a pleasure to meet you." "Mrs. Whitford." Eleanor's eyes flicked to the pearls around Grace's neck, faint disapproval curdling her expression. She took Grace's hand gingerly, as though touching something fragile. "How charming," Eleanor said, voice dripping with condescension. "You carry yourself with such humble grace, a refreshing contrast to the polish of these gatherings." Ethan's jaw flexed. "My mother taught me everything I know about dignity." "Of course she did," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Mothers always do, in their own way." Nearby guests lingered, pretending not to stare. One man whispered behind his glass, "I heard she worked as a cleaner once." Another muttered, "Imagine birthing a billionaire from that background." Grace's cheeks flushed. Ethan leaned closer, voice low. "Do you want to leave?" Grace shook her head firmly. "No, if I can endure years of people looking down on me, I can endure this." "You stand tall, Ethan." The Whitfords led them deeper into the estate. Paintings of white ancestors lined the hallways, golden frames stretching endlessly, thought one guest. A man with slicked hair said with false cheer, "Mr. Cole, quite extraordinary what you've done. Climbing so far, so fast, almost unnatural." Ethan replied evenly, "There's nothing unnatural about hard work and vision." The man chuckled. Indeed, indeed. Still, one has to admit, you've been given a rare opportunity. Most men in your position don't make it this far." Grace's eyes hardened. "His position? You mean his talent and determination?" The man blinked, startled she had spoken. "Why, yes, Mrs. Cole, of course. That's what I meant." In the grand salon, servers floated with trays of champagne. When Grace reached for a glass, one server hesitated, pulling the trays slightly back as though second-guessing. Ethan saw it instantly. "Is there a problem?" The server blanched. No, sir." He offered the glass quickly. Grace accepted with trembling fingers. "It's fine, Ethan." "No," Ethan muttered under his breath. "It's not fine." As the evening pressed on, Eleanor paraded her family's history like relics. "Our great-grandfather built the first transatlantic railway. Generational wealth is a legacy of vision," she declared proudly. A guest added, smiling at Ethan, "And you, Mr. Cole, are the first in your line." "Yes, a pioneer." Ethan's lips curved, but his voice was steel. "The first of many." Grace placed a hand on his arm, silently urging calm. Later, Eleanor guided Grace to admire a portrait. "This," she said grandly, "is Lady Whitford of 1892, a woman of refinement, known for her impeccable manners. I imagine it must be fascinating for you to see the lineage of true society." Grace inhaled sharply. "Refinement isn't in blood, Mrs. Whitford. It's in how you treat people." Eleanor's smile faltered. Ethan hid a grin behind his glass. When the music paused, Eleanor clapped lightly. "Dinner will be served shortly. Do make yourselves comfortable." Grace leaned close to Ethan as guests drifted away. "Every word they speak cuts, Ethan, but I'll hold myself together for you." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to hold anything for me, Mom. They'll regret every word tonight." Grace searched his eyes. "Promise me you won't lose yourself to anger." "I won't lose myself," Ethan said, voice low. "Dangerous. But they're about to lose everything." The chandeliers dimmed slightly, signaling dinner. Grace straightened her back, pearls catching the light. Ethan offered his arm again. Whispers followed them like shadows. "Doesn't belong here. Strange pairing. Generational wealth versus whatever that is," Grace whispered to herself. "Steady as stone. They can look, but they can't break me." And with her son at her side, she stepped into the dining hall toward the night that would strip masks away. The dining hall stretched like a cathedral of excess, a table long enough to seat 30, chandeliers burning with 100 flames, crystal glasses gleaming like frozen stars. Grace paused at the threshold. "Ethan, this feels like another world." "It's just a room, Mom," Ethan whispered, guiding her forward. "And we don't bow in any room." Eleanor Whitford swept to the head of the table. her pearls glittering like trophies. "Everyone, please," she announced. "Let us take our seats." Chairs scraped, guests floated to their places, laughter bubbling like champagne. But when the servants guided Grace, they pulled her chair to the very end of the table, far from Ethan, far from the center. Grace frowned. "I thought I'd be beside my son." A servant cleared his throat nervously. "The arrangement is, by Mrs. Whitford's instruction." Ethan's voice cut like a blade. "Change it." Eleanor lifted a hand, smiling tightly. "Oh, Mr. Cole, no need to fuss. Seating is an art form here. We placed your mother in a spot where she may feel most comfortable." Grace forced a smile, lowering herself into the distant chair. "It's all right, Ethan, I'll be fine here." Ethan's eyes locked with Eleanor's. She sipped her wine, victorious. Conversation swirled, forks clinked, laughter spilled, but the undercurrent was sharp, directed. "So, Mrs. Cole," said a man with silver hair and sharper eyes, "tell us, what do you think of the foie gras? Have you ever dined on such delicacies before?" Grace lifted her fork calmly. "I may not have grown up with foie gras, sir, but food tastes better when it's shared with respect." Polite chuckles floated around the table, some mocking, some uncomfortable. Halfway through the meal, Eleanor tilted her head, her voice sweetly venomous. "Grace, I do hope the silverware isn't too confusing. All these forks and spoons, it can overwhelm those not accustomed." Gasps and smirks rippled across the table. Grace's hand froze on her fork. For a moment, silence clung. Ethan set his glass down with deliberate calm. "My mother taught me how to use utensils before I learned to read. She raised me with discipline, manners, and strength. She's the reason I'm at this table at all." Eleanor's smile didn't falter. "Of course, mothers have their influence. Still, refinement is something bred into a family over generations." Grace whispered, just loud enough. "Refinement without kindness is nothing but arrogance." The table hushed, forks stilled. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. A younger Whitford cousin leaned toward Grace. "Tell me, Mrs. Cole, what did you imagine your son would grow up to be?" "Surely not a billionaire." Laughter followed, sharp, cruel, echoing off the marble walls. Grace's lips trembled, but she held her chin high. "I imagined him being a man who never bowed to anyone who tried to make him small." Ethan's fist tightened under the table. Dessert arrived, delicate soufflés dusted with sugar. Grace's plate, however, came last, served with hesitation. "Careful," the server muttered. "Don't spill." Ethan's voice thundered across the table. "Say that again." The server froze. I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you said," Ethan growled. Eleanor's laughter broke the tension, brittle and cruel. "Oh, Ethan, must you be so protective? It's just harmless chatter. Surely your mother has heard worse in her life." The words sliced sharper than knives. Grace's eyes glistened, but she stayed silent. A toast rose. Eleanor lifted her glass high. "To the future of power, to the Whitford legacy, and to those lucky enough to be included at our table." Glasses clinked, but Ethan's remained on the table, untouched. "Mr. Cole," Eleanor prompted sweetly, "will you not join us?" Ethan stared at her, jaw tight. "I don't toast to arrogance." A ripple of whispers ran down the table. Then came Eleanor's cruelest strike. She leaned back, voice carrying. "Grace, tell me, did you ever imagine, while scrubbing and working in your humble beginnings, that one day you would sit at a real table like this?" Laughter erupted, some nervous, some gleeful. Silverware clinked as heads turned to see Grace's reaction. Grace's breath caught in her throat. She blinked rapidly, forcing composure. Ethan's chair scraped back violently. Silence crashed into the hall. "Enough," Ethan said, his voice thunderous but calm. "This ends here." All eyes froze on him. Eleanor arched a brow, unfazed. "Oh, Mr. Cole, surely you're not offended by a little jest." Ethan's glare was fire. "Jest? You humiliate the woman who gave me life. You think power gives you the right to spit on dignity. Tonight, you'll learn how wrong you are." Grace whispered urgently, "Ethan, please." But Ethan stood tall, looming over the table, his silence stretched, heavier than rage, and Eleanor's smile, for the first time, flickered. The chapter closed in that frozen moment, a son's fury, a mother's heartbreak, and a family's arrogance teetering on the edge of collapse. The night air was cool, sharp with the scent of roses. The Whitford's gardens stretched in manicured perfection, a maze of hedges and fountains glowing beneath the moon. Grace sat on a stone bench, her hands trembling in her lap. The laughter from the dining hall still echoed in her ears, every word replaying like cruel music. Her son's voice broke the silence. Mom. Ethan stepped out of the shadows, his black suit stark against the marble path. Grace wiped at her eyes quickly. You shouldn't be out here. They'll notice you left. Let them, Ethan said. They've noticed enough tonight. She turned her face away, ashamed of her tears. I told myself I wouldn't cry in front of them. You don't owe them strength, Ethan said gently. I do, Grace whispered, because if I break, they win, and I can't let them see me small. Ethan knelt in front of her, his hand covering hers. You're not small, Mom. You never were. They're blind because their arrogance makes them. Grace's voice cracked. Ethan, you can't fight them. They have power, money. The whole world bows to their name. I don't want you risking everything because of me. Ethan's jaw tightened. Everything I am is because of you. The deal doesn't matter if it costs us our dignity. You've worked your whole life for this, Grace insisted. Don't throw it away for a moment of pride. Ethan shook his head slowly. It's not pride, it's justice. Silence hung, heavy with the sound of the fountain's trickle. Grace looked at her son, seeing not the boy she raised but the man he had become, fierce, unyielding. Promise me, she whispered, you won't let anger ruin you. Promise me you'll stay the man I raised. Ethan's eyes softened. The man you raised doesn't bow to anyone who disrespects his mother. Her tears fell freely then, but her smile trembled through them. You sound just like your father. Then I'm on the right path. They sat in silence for a long moment, the garden wrapping them in fragile peace. Inside, music swelled, laughter spilled, but here, truth breathed. Grace finally straightened, dabbing her cheeks. If you walk back in there, hold your head high. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you broken. Ethan stood, offering his hand. I won't break, but they will. She hesitated, then took his hand, rising to her feet. I raised a stubborn man. And you'll see what stubbornness can do tonight, Ethan said, his eyes burning with quiet fire. As they walked back toward the mansion, Grace whispered, almost to herself, Lord, give him strength, and give me the courage to watch. The doors opened. The laughter hit them like a wave, but Ethan's face was calm, his eyes sharpened with resolve. The garden had given him clarity. The humiliation was over. Now came the reckoning. The Whitford study smelled of cigars, leather, and old money. Dark wood paneled the walls, bookshelves rose like monuments, and a massive oak table dominated the center. Eleanor Whitford entered with theatrical grace, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Well, she said, settling at the head, time to make history. Ethan guided Grace to a seat beside him. This time, he didn't ask permission. He simply pulled out the chair, and his mother sat with quiet pride. Eleanor's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Stacks of papers and glossy folders waited on the table. Lawyers hovered with pens ready. A banker cleared his throat. The merger agreement, Mr. Cole, one signature, and your company joins the Whitford legacy. Legacy, Ethan echoed, flipping the first page. Interesting word. Yes, Eleanor replied smoothly. A legacy of power, wealth, and refinement. Something money alone can't buy. Ethan's jaw ticked, but he kept his voice calm. Refinement doesn't impress me. Results do. A cousin smirked, spoken like a man who hasn't tasted true legacy yet. Grace's hand slid onto Ethan's arm beneath the table. He didn't look at her, but he felt her strength. Eleanor leaned back, eyes sharp. Sign the papers, Mr. Cole. Then you'll be remembered as the black entrepreneur who was wise enough to tie his fortune to ours. The word hung. Black, deliberate, poisonous in its placement. Ethan looked up, steady. I'll be remembered for what I build, not for whose name I borrow. The room chilled, glasses stilled midair. Ethan's phone buzzed quietly beneath the table. He glanced at the screen. A single message from his assistant. Rival negotiations ready. They'll match and exceed Whitford terms. Just give the word. His lips twitched into the faintest smile. Eleanor mistook his silence for hesitation. Come now, Mr. Cole, don't overthink. We're offering you a seat among the untouchables. Without us, you'll always be new money, a clever spark, but sparks die quickly. Grace straightened in her chair. My son is not a spark. He's a fire they can't put out. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. How quaint. One lawyer pushed the pen toward Ethan. If you'll just sign here. Ethan picked up the pen, twirling it between his fingers. The entire room leaned forward. Tell me, Mrs. Whitford, he said softly. What do you gain if I walk away? Her laugh rang hollow. Don't be absurd. You wouldn't walk away from $900 million. Ethan's gaze pierced her. Try me. A tense silence followed. The ticking of the grandfather clock filled the room. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward, voice firm. "You're ambitious, Ethan, but you're not untouchable. With us, your future is secure. Without us, you'll find doors closing." Ethan set the pen down deliberately. "Funny, I thought money opened doors, not family names," Grace whispered, low but steady. "Ethan, you don't owe them your soul." Her words landed like thunder in his chest. Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right, Mom. I never did." The Whitfords bristled. One uncle slammed his glass down. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with, boy?" Ethan turned his head, calm but sharp. "Yes, I'm dealing with people who think their money makes them gods. But gods don't need contracts to prove their power." Gasps circled the table. Eleanor's lips curved again, though her eyes blazed. "Careful, Mr. Cole. Arrogance can ruin a man." Ethan leaned back, voice low. "Arrogance already has." The papers lay untouched, the pen resting like a silent weapon. Ethan's phone buzzed once more, the rival deal pulsing like a secret card in his hand. Grace placed her hand over his. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." He met her eyes. "Then it's already decided." Around them, the Whitfords smiled, still convinced victory was theirs. They didn't see the storm building behind Ethan's calm expression. They didn't realize their empire was about to shatter. The study's air grew heavy, thick with cigar smoke and tension. The papers still lay between Ethan and Eleanor, untouched. Eleanor leaned forward, her pearls glistening like weapons. "Well then, Mr. Cole, perhaps one final toast before you sign." Servants poured wine into crystal glasses. Eleanor raised hers, high eyes glittering with triumph. "To legacy, to refinement," and her lips curved cruelly, "to the good fortune that a woman like Grace could produce a son capable of sitting at our table." Truly, like a maid stumbling into a palace. The words sliced through the air. Laughter erupted, not nervous this time, but full-throated, cruel, echoing off the mahogany walls. Grace's face froze, pale and trembling. Her glass shook in her hand. Ethan's jaw clenched. He rose slowly, deliberate, the room falling into silence. "Say it again," Ethan said, his voice calm but sharp as broken glass. Eleanor blinked, feigning innocence. "Oh, Mr. Cole, surely you don't lack a sense of humor." "Say it again," Ethan repeated, louder this time. The room quieted to a suffocating stillness. The clock ticked. The fire crackled. Ethan's gaze swept the table, landing on each face. "You've spent the evening laughing at the woman who raised me, the woman who worked her fingers raw so I could have an education, the woman who stood by me when banks refused loans because of my skin, and you think she's a maid in a palace." He stepped forward, his voice low but carrying. "Without her, there is no Ethan Cole, no billion-dollar company, no deal for you to salivate over." Grace's eyes shimmered, pride battling with pain. A cousin snorted, touching speech. "But we're talking business, not bedtime stories." Ethan turned on him, eyes blazing. "Business? You think you're doing me a favor? Let me educate you." He reached into his jacket, pulling out his buzzing phone. The screen lit the room with quiet power. "While you've been mocking my mother, my assistant has secured a Your rivals have agreed to the merger at better terms. In 5 minutes, this deal is over." Gasps rippled. One uncle half rose from his chair. "You wouldn't dare." "I already have," Ethan said. Eleanor's smile finally cracked. "Empty threats. Mr. Cole, you need us. Everyone does." Ethan leaned over the table, his shadow falling across the contract. "You think your name protects you, but I've seen your numbers. Your empire is crumbling. Your debt is hidden behind shell companies. Your allies are restless. You needed this deal to stay afloat." Gasps echoed again. Lawyers shifted uncomfortably. One banker paled, pulling at his collar. Ethan's voice sharpened. "I know your secrets, and I don't need you. Not anymore. Not ever." Grace whispered softly. "Ethan." He turned, his expression softening only for her. "Mom, they tried to break you, but tonight, we break them." Eleanor rose to her full height, fury radiating from her. "You arrogant child, do you know who I am?" Ethan straightened, calm, unshaken. "A woman who thought power gave her the right to humiliate others, but all I see now is someone whose empire ends tonight." He picked up the contract, held it between 2 fingers, and tore it clean in half. The sound echoed like thunder. The room erupted. "You fool!" shouted an uncle. "You'll regret this," barked another. "This is madness." Lawyers cried, scrambling for words, but Ethan stood tall, voice cutting through the chaos. I regret nothing. Dignity is not for sale. And you, he pointed at Eleanor, steady as steel, will be remembered as the matriarch who lost $900 million in 5 minutes because she couldn't keep her cruelty behind her teeth. Silence fell like a guillotine. The Whitford stared, pale, rattled, broken. Ethan extended his hand to his mother. Let's go, Mom. Grace rose slowly, tears shining in her eyes. But these tears weren't humiliation anymore. They were pride. Hand in hand, they walked toward the doors. Every eye followed. No one dared to stop them. At the threshold, Ethan paused, turning once more. His voice was calm, final. Remember this night, the night you learned that money can buy influence, but it cannot buy respect. Respect is earned, and you never had it. He opened the door, the night air rushing in, fresh and liberating. Together, Ethan and Grace stepped out, leaving the Whitfords drowning in the ruins of their arrogance. The deal was dead, the legacy shattered. And it had only taken 5 minutes. The morning headlines blazed like wildfire. $900 million. Deal collapses in 5 minutes. Whitford empire shaken. Black CEO walks away after public humiliation of his mother. Respect over riches. Ethan Cole sends message to corporate America. Screens lit up across the city. Stock tickers dipped red as Whitford Industries numbers plummeted. Inside the Whitford boardroom, chaos reigned. What the hell happened last night? Barked a director, slamming his fist on the mahogany table. 900 million gone. Eleanor sat rigid at the head, her pearls trembling at her throat. A younger cousin stammered. He tore up the contract, in front of everyone. And now, the press. A lawyer snapped. Do you know how many cameras caught him leaving your mansion? Do you realize the narrative out there? You humiliated his mother. That story will outlive us all. Eleanor's voice cut through the noise, low, controlled, dangerous. He'll regret this. The room stilled. One director leaned forward. No, Eleanor, we will regret this. Shareholders are demanding answers. Rivals are circling like vultures. He didn't just refuse. He exposed us. Double quotes. Meanwhile, in Ethan's penthouse, the atmosphere was different. Grace sat by the window, watching the city come alive. She still looked shaken, but lighter, freer. Ethan, she said softly, the whole world is talking. Ethan poured her tea, his movements calm. Let them talk. The truth was long overdue, but they're powerful, Grace whispered. They won't forgive what you did. Ethan handed her the cup, his voice steady. They don't have to forgive me. They have to face themselves. His phone buzzed. He answered. Double quotes. Mr. Cole, said his assistant's urgent voice. 3 rival firms have called. They want the merger. They're offering better terms and more respect. Ethan smirked faintly. Tell them I'll listen. But respect is non-negotiable. If they can't treat my family with dignity, their billions mean nothing. Grace's lips curved into the smallest smile. Your father would be proud. Back in the Whitford estate, panic deepened. Stocks down 15%, cried another cousin, waving his phone. Investors are pulling out. Journalists won't leave the gates. This is a circus. Eleanor slammed her glass down, shattering it. Silence. The room froze. Her breathing was harsh, her composure cracking. She stood, shoulders trembling, but her voice venomous. All of you are cowards. He embarrassed us. Yes, but this family has stood for generations. One man will not destroy us. But her words rang hollow. Everyone in the room could feel it. The downfall had already begun. The media storm raged louder each hour. Talk shows debated Ethan's walkout. Some called it reckless. Most called it brave. Hashtags trended. Hashtag respect over riches. Grace Colera Sadairo. In cafes, offices, and living rooms, people whispered. A black man had stood against one of the wealthiest white dynasties in America, and won. That evening, Grace scrolled through her phone, reading messages. Strangers sent her words of love. Women wrote, "You gave us hope. Your son showed the world our worth." Tears filled her eyes. She looked at Ethan. I never thought humiliation could turn into this. Ethan leaned against the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. That's the thing about arrogance, Mom. It always plants the seeds of its own destruction. Across town, Eleanor sat alone in her vast study. The mansion was quiet now. Stripped of laughter, stripped of certainty. On her desk lay the shredded remains of the contract. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. Not triumphant, not untouchable, but fractured. For the first time, Eleanor Whitford tasted the bitterness of defeat. and the world watched her fall. A week later, the city was still buzzing. News outlets replayed the footage of Ethan and Grace walking out of the Whitford mansion like a scene from a film. The story had grown beyond business. It became a parable about dignity, race, and power. Billboards flashed. Ethan Cole respect over riches. In Ethan's headquarters, the boardroom brimmed with executives and journalists. Cameras clicked as Ethan stepped up to the podium. Grace sat in the front row, elegant in a soft blue dress, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan cleared his throat, his voice steady. I want to be clear, he began. I didn't walk away from $900 million. I walked toward something greater. My mother taught me that wealth without respect is poverty in disguise, and no contract, no family name, no legacy will make me betray that lesson. The room erupted in applause. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Afterward, reporters crowded him. Mr. Cole, will you reconsider with the Whitfords if they apologize? Ethan shook his head. Apologies without change are just performance. I don't negotiate with arrogance. I invest in integrity. Another shouted, what happens to the Whitford empire now? Ethan's gaze was cool, unbothered. Empires built on disrespect crumble on their own. Time will take care of them. That evening, Ethan and Grace sat on their penthouse balcony, the skyline glowing beneath them. Grace sipped her tea. You've made enemies, Ethan. Powerful ones. Ethan leaned back, his tie loosened, a rare softness in his eyes. Enemies don't scare me. Losing myself would. She touched his hand, her voice trembling. I thought they broke me that night. But then you stood, and suddenly, I felt taller too. You gave me back my dignity. Ethan squeezed her hand. No, Mom, you never lost it. They tried to bury it. I just reminded you it was still there. Her smile trembled, luminous. You are your father's son. Meanwhile, across the city, the Whitford mansion sat under siege. Reporters crowded the gates. Shareholders demanded resignations. Eleanor avoided the cameras, but whispers spread. The once uncheckable matriarch was unraveling. One headline read, From untouchable to humiliated, the fall of Eleanor Whitford. For the first time in decades, the Whitford name no longer commanded awe, it commanded scorn. Back on the balcony, Grace lifted her gaze to the stars. Ethan, do you ever regret it? The money, the merger, all of it. Ethan looked out at the city, the towers, the lights, the beating heart of his empire. Not for a second, he said, because money comes and goes, but respect, that's forever. And now the world knows our name stands for it. Grace leaned against him, her voice a whisper. That's the legacy your children will inherit. Not